Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Board games are notorious for reiterating on one another, but also reiterating on themselves. In this video, I'm going to talk about my favorite board game sequels that make some major changes to the core framework, and then give you my favorite thing that's changed between the two editions. And overall, my number one is going to be the game that I recommend the most that you should get for sure instead of that original edition. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It's the best way to help us grow. And for those of you who already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's get talking about my favorite board game sequels. Now, before we begin, I have a couple of honorable mentions, and these first three are games that I have not played the original version of, so I don't have that comparison to draw from, but I do recommend them nonetheless. This first game in this category is Massive Darkness 2. This is a dungeon-crawling, asymmetric game where you are going to be chopping up enemies in these single-shot scenarios, gaining loot, and then using those to defeat some form of objective. Incredible game, but haven't played the original. Next is Guards of Atlantis II, a redone version of this MOBA team-based game. You take your crew of characters versus your opponents, but each player is only controlling a single character. So this is my favorite 6-player game right now, and I love the way that your characters move and level up, but have not played the first edition, so I don't really know the differences. And then lastly, you have Glenmore 2 Chronicles, which is a tile placement game where you play as these Scottish clans, and you're putting tiles in your own clan in front of you to generate resources, abilities, and powers, and it's got this awesome tile selection system and a chronicle system that allows you to change up the gameplay each time you come back to it. Makes it exciting to engage with again and again. So these three were disqualified for that reason, just haven't played the original versions. And then one last game that I don't really want to talk about on this list just because it's full of spoilers. This is Pandemic Legacy Season 1, but if you haven't played this, you need to. It's one of the best experiences I've ever had in board gaming, but if I were to talk about my favorite things, it would get into spoilers, and I don't want to do that. So I think you should go get this if you haven't tried it already, and if you enjoy cooperative games, in particular the Pandemic line, this is a perfect game for 2-4 players. Make sure you have a group that's ready to do something like this, though. So those are my honorable mentions. We've got the games that I just haven't played the original for, and then one that I don't want to talk about because of all of the potential spoilers. And the last thing before we get into the list is quickly, I want to talk about our channel partner. This is Into the AM Studios. They've partnered with SideGame LLC, and as you can see, I'm repping one of their t-shirts here, and they are going to be giving us some kickback for recommending their shirts. So if you do want to support the channel, you can use our coupon code, this is SideGame Strong, in order to get 10% off of your order for your shirts, and then we'll get that kickback to our channel. So if you want to support the channel without buying board games or anything like that, you can do that. The link is in the description below. Just make sure you use promo code SideGameStrong. As you can see, I am repping this nice volcano shirt. It's called the Volcanic Tee, and I chose this one because before I moved to Colorado Springs, I actually lived in Hawaii. I lived right next to the volcano on the Big Island, and it actually erupted while we were there, and this reminded me of that. Just seeing that crazy time, and we were wearing face masks before it was cool, but this reminds me of that, and I love the artwork, like how bright and vibrant it is, and the shirts themselves I enjoy wearing. I wouldn't be wearing them if I didn't. I'm a pretty big guy, so having something that doesn't feel uncomfortable and I feel fine in it, that's good. That's a good thing, to have a cool design and not feel like it's something I'm uncomfortable in. So I can recommend these strongly. These are the Volcanic Tees, in particular for this one, but just the t-shirts, graphic designs, and there's a load to choose from. So if you want to support the channel through our channel partner, you can check out Into the AM Studios and make sure that you're using the coupon code SideGameStrong. With that out of the way, let's get started with the list with number 10. Number 10 is going to Frosthaven. This is a dungeon crawl game where you play as mercenaries in the town of Frosthaven, this outpost in the Arctic. You'll move your characters around using your action cards, picking 2 at the start of each round, using the top half of one and the bottom of the other once it gets to your turn in initiative, moving your character, activating abilities, and defeating enemies. You'll have some objective that you're trying to complete, but the main goal usually is to defeat the enemies before you are completely exhausted running out of those action cards. My favorite part about this sequel has to be the redesign of the graphic design of the characters, and then there's just the character updates in general. So each of the cards of the characters has been changed in order to apply more nuanced abilities and activations. This is my favorite character that I've played so far, and it's one of the core 6, which is crazy. This is the Blink Blade, and it's a character that has multiple speeds and settings that it can go at. And the way the new graphic design has been changed, they've actually updated the cards, giving you ways that you can easily read what these effects are referring to. I love that they're able to take these more complicated effects, and because of this change with the structure and the standard of the cards, you're now able to do cool things with it. Love this concept. And then another cool addition that they just added in general is more thematic flair to the characters in the form of replacing the summons. In the original game, you just had these circles that were like arcane symbols, but now you actually have artwork that represents the summons that you're bringing out with you. It just adds a little bit more character and flair to all of the characters, and almost every character has at least one summon that they can dabble with, I think. Don't quote me on that. That might be wrong. The characters that I've played, at least, actually, I don't think the Blinkblade has any, so immediately incorrect. So that is the summons, as well as just the entire graphic design, and the character designs in these are amazing. And that's just talking about the core characters, and I'm not going to get into of the unlockable characters. I've only had one character that's been a dud so far, but everything else has been something I've been excited to come back to and play again and again. So that's my number 10. That is Frosthaven. Number 9 goes to a brand new one to the library. This is Great Western Trail New Zealand. This is a redone version of the original Great Western Trail and has you playing as sheep farmers in New Zealand. You'll be using your hand of cards in order to interact with buildings along the trail, and when you get to the end of this trail, you'll make a delivery where you take the values of your cards and trade them for some currency that you'll be able to not only spend in the future rounds, but also make a delivery with. And this will give you some bonuses, objectives, special abilities, but you'll be going through this trail as it changes based on the actions of the players, as well as the cards that you're going to be drawing from this personal deck. Now, my favorite changes for this version of Great Western Trail are twofold, starting off with these additional cards. Now, first off, the cards have dual purpose, where you use them for your deliveries at the end based on their value. You want different colors of sheep, but you can also use them for these pseudo sales during the game by using these sheep shearers at the bottom. So you're using that secondary value, and you can essentially make these smaller sales based on how many of those shearers you have during the game. So you're able to modulate your hand more and interact more with the cards that you're holding. Having those dual purpose is interesting and exciting. And then the other thing has to be this addition of the boat system. It's replaced the railroad track, and it borrows some ideas from the Rails to the North expansion from 2nd edition, where you are going to be moving this little boat at the top here, and there are actual multiple paths that you can go on, so you're not railroaded onto specific tracks. But they're going to give you options to put out these little outposts that give you special abilities, brand new cards that go into your deck that are strictly just for deck building, like special effects that'll encourage you to cycle through, but then also more options for delivering. You can now have extra spots where you can deliver your wool that you'll be shearing. You can just make your standard deliveries to these outer islands and get additional points and effects. Love this addition, and I think it's a great blend with more choice that's been injected through the use of the multiple routes in the boat system. So I love this one. That is number 9. That is Great Western Trail New Zealand. My number 8 goes to Everdell Farshore. This is a nautical re-implementation of the original Everdell, and it keeps the core framework of the game. On your turn, you're going to be placing out workers to gain resources or get special abilities. You also have the option to play cards from your hand or from this middle area, and those will go in front of you, giving you new abilities and powers, passives, instants. And then lastly, you can pass for the season, where you'll reclaim all of your workers and then generate some resources potentially for the next round. So you're trying to squeeze as much as you can when it comes to efficiency and making sure that you're using things the best way possible to score the most points. Now, my favorite part about this new sequel, though, has to do with the way they've injected use into every single card, and that's through these little compass tokens. In this upper right section, you'll have 2 face-up compasses that say, hey, if you play a card of this specific type, and you can even do a card that has both types, you get to move up a space on the boat track on the side of the board for each one that you match. And I love this because it gives you an incentive system to try different strategies that you may not normally play, and it changes the value of the cards each time you play and throughout the course of the game itself. When the last player passes from a season, new tokens will be revealed, so you can wait in order to see what could potentially change in value based on what's face up in the market or what you're holding into your hand. It also encourages you to try new lines of play, because now this card that maybe you completely ignored last game becomes viable, because hey, now I get a bonus, I get bonus points, I get bonus effects, and this card all of a sudden becomes something I'm wanting to invest in. I like that it injects that encouragement into all of the cards, and there's a bunch of other things that have happened in Everdell Farshore, but that's got to be my favorite, just that encouragement of getting to try new things. Love that. So that is my number 8. That is Everdell Farshore. My number 7 goes to Brass Birmingham. This is a game of industrial revolution, as you are going to be creating industries throughout Europe. Now, on your turn, you're going to have this hand of cards, and you'll be using 2 of them to take actions to either build networks, build buildings onto the board, or to make sales. So you're going to be trying to send all of your goods that you're producing to the different markets that want them, and it's first come, first serve on a lot of these resources, so you're using using the resources on the board, as well as potentially diving into the resources that your other players are going to be generating. So it's all about timing and making the most of whatever is available. But my favorite part about this sequel has to do with the customization of the different markets you can invest in. There's another action that I haven't talked about called developing, where you can actually adjust what's on your board instead of building them out. So on your turn, you can discard a card to remove some of these tiles. And when you look at the tiles, there are several different industries that you can invest in. Some industries have alternative costs, like the cotton mills here. The first one only costs money, but then it costs coal, then a combination of coal as well as iron. But then you have these boxes where the first one costs coal, the next one just costs iron, then double coal, iron, and there's some that don't cost any additional resources outside of money. So you can modulate and choose which of these different industries that you want to invest in based on where you are, where you're playing at the start of the game, but also even during the game, if you invested in specific different goods, you can actually remove them and change how you're paying for them through that development action. I like that there's choice from the very beginning, but also throughout, and it keeps you interested and playing on that tactical foot while having that long-term strategy in mind. So that is my number 7, that is Brass Birmingham. My number 6 goes to Twice as Clever, also known as Dopplet So Clever. This is in the Ganshan Clever line of games, a roll and write where you're trying to make the most points. The game flow is quite simple on your turn, and there will be rolling some dice, and you'll take one of the dice and place it into your activation area. Every die that's a lower value of the one that you took goes to this middle area up at the top, and the other players will be able to use that. So every action is, am I taking something that has a high number because of the value I can get for the actions, and then getting less action choice in the future, or am I taking something weaker to get more choices in future turns? It's a core concept, but it translates well, and this entire franchise has been baked on the backbones of that simple action system. Now, my favorite part of this sequel in particular has to be the addition of this gray action. Now, as mentioned before, whenever you take a die, everything that's lower than the die that you took goes into that center area. But this has taken this concept and added more gamification to it, and I love it. The way it works is every time you take a silver die, or a white die if you want it to be silver, because it can be wild, everything that returns to the silver tray allows you to cross off sections in this gray area, which is going to give you bonuses based on if you complete columns, or it's going to give you scoring if you can complete rows. So you are trying to make it so certain situations happen, trying to hit things at the right time, knowing when to pull, when to push, and you even have an extra bonus action that allows you to bring back dice from that silver tray area, so that way if you are pulling that silver die early just to get a bunch of numbers, then you can get it back for your future turns. I love this concept of using the existing mechanisms in interesting ways, and I think this expansion, the Dopplet So Clever in particular, does it the best, and I think it's my favorite one out of all of them. So it is Twice as Clever, my number 6. My number 5 goes to Railroad Inc. Challenge, another roll and write game that takes this concept of route building but pairs it with a simple roll and write system. You'll be rolling dice every single round, and then you'll have to use all of those dice on your board somewhere. Your goal is to try to connect as many of these exits as possible to each other, as it'll give you extra points at the end of the game, but you're also trying to limit the number of these going nowhere roads, so you'll lose points for each of those. There's also a bunch of other ways to score when it comes to getting these special abilities of buildings. You can also score based on scenario objectives, but my favorite update with this sequel is the addition of challenge cards, and that's where the title comes from. Each time you play, based on the scenario that you're playing, you can have cards that are specific to that challenge, or you can have these generic symbols that you'll be using, and these are going to push you to do funky plays in the early stages of the game, because it's first come, first serve to the maximum points on each of them. For example, this one in the upper left says, if you have 5 of the boxes checked out in the middle, then you score this, 4 points if you're the first one to do it. The next one is 3 of the corners are filled out, 3 of these houses that have been slotted. So you are trying to manipulate the board to make sure that you're able to get that before other people. And then after you've achieved them, you have this crazy smattering of rails and tracks that you've created, and now you have to adjust on the fly to make it work by the end of the experience. So you're rushing to do this, and then you're rushing to clean it all up to make sure that it looks good and you're getting as many points as possible. I love that juggling of the scenarios, and as mentioned before, the fact that there are some of these goals that are specific to the expansions as well make this one that is going to be varied, exciting, and pushes you to make interesting choices from that very first turn. So that's my number 5, that is Railroad Inc. Challenge. My number 4 goes to Burgle Bros 2, The Casino Capers. This is a heist board game where you have your crew of thieves and you'll be breaking into a casino. In the original, there were 3 levels, but this new edition only has 2, as you're going to get in, find the codes to the safe, and then crack it open. On your turn, you'll be using your action points to move around the board, interact with the different buildings, all in an attempt not to get caught and get out with whatever the loot is you're trying to find. And my favorite part about this sequel is the addition of these these grand finales, and this is a huge turning point in the experience. In the original game, you would go in, you open up 3 safes, and then you leave. But in this one, there's the codes that you need to get, and then you get into the safe, and then you reveal a finale, and that determines what's actually in the safe. So no spoilers here, but you can imagine what sort of things could be in a safe. Maybe you're going after a vehicle of some kind. Well, what happens if you see a vehicle in the middle of a casino? How are you going to get out? You can think about what sort of thematic situations can pull from this, and this is on top of the core framework of Burgle Bros and just how solid that entire system is. I love this grand finale system. It's a new, unique scenario-based way to play, and you can also play it where you don't even see what you're stealing before you start, and so that way you're totally surprised when you do open that safe and you have to adjust onto the fly. Exciting, tense, and cinematic. This is Burgle Bros 2, my number 4. My number 3 goes to Age of Innovation. This is a Terra Mystica sequel that has you playing as fantasy races with one goal in mind: expansion. Now, this is going to be done through terraforming, as each race has their own land that they like to live on, and so they'll need to expand and get to new locations that they can actually settle on. Now, during the game, you're going to be taking actions in order to build new buildings, upgrade existing ones, gain resources, gain special abilities and powers, move up these cult tracks, as well as utilize your powers and abilities to build bigger cities, monuments, and spread out across the board. There's going to be some scoring that will guide you how you want to be building specific buildings, because you're going to get bonuses during the game for doing things, and you can plan for this from the very start of the game when you're drafting your initial characters. My favorite change from this one, from the base Terra Mystica, is the inclusion of choices throughout the game that are going to be made in tandem with that initial starting setup choice. As mentioned before, you're going to see what those round bonuses are, but you'll also get to look at some of these bonuses that you can obtain during the game. So these come in the form of the namesake, the innovation tiles. So during the game, you're going to have options to spend a new resource books to gain special effects. Now, these can come in the form of special abilities with buildings that are attached to them, ways to score additional points, new ways that you can interact with the game and pursue extra point advantage. And so this can happen up to 3 times per player. There's a bit of a race element to these because it's first come, first serve on these, so other people can be gunning for the ones that you are. So there's a timing aspect that's been just ramped up even more in Age of Innovation. This also extends to the abilities of the different characters. When you draft your initial character, you get to choose the color of your character as well as the ability of like your faction, essentially. And then the last thing you'll get is like a round bonus tile. But then during the game, in the original, you had a pre-printed ability on your board here, but now you get to actually choose it once you make your large building on the left here. So you'll have a tile that is on the side and you'll slot it in, and there's more than the number of players, so you have several options in order from which to pick. So I love that you have the innovations that you get to choose from, you have your special ability on your temple here that you get to pick from. So all of this in tandem gives you a way to make a plan from turn 1, but also potentially adapt based on the timing and whatever is taken during the game itself. I love this tense situation, and it leads to such satisfying buildup. That's my number 3, that is Age of Innovation. My number 2 goes to Paperback Adventures, a roguelike deck-building word game where you have to defeat a gauntlet of 6 bosses by creating words and generating icons and activating special abilities. Every round, you'll use your hand of cards to generate a word, and that word will be splayed in a direction, producing symbols, whether it be attack, defense, or energy that can be used to trigger your items. Then you'll trigger the effect of whatever is on the top here, and then remove that card from the battle. So your deck is going to start dwindling, and your choices are going to change. The enemy will then fight back, defending or attacking themselves, trying to reduce your health to 0. And your health is persistent from each of these encounters. So you want to make sure that you can serve it the best as possible, while also making sure that you're getting resources and powers in order to defeat those enemies. At the end of each battle, you get to loot the character that you defeated, getting special effects, maybe replacing different letters in your deck, getting new upgrades, and then also get a chance to visit the shop, which can give you more letters, passive effects in the form of MacGuffins, and more items that you can use your energy on that you produce during your fights. My favorite change to Paperback Adventures is pretty much the entire thing, as the addition of this boss fighting element has elevated the entire word building experience of the original. In the base game, you had a simple goal of using your letters to make words, and the words created currency, and the currency was used to buy new letters or buy victory point cards, and whoever had the most points win. In this one, you have this huge design space that gets to be explored because of the addition of attacking, defending, fighting, and then using abilities to help facilitate those needs. And they use the word building system in unique and interesting ways. One of my favorite ways they do this is through the addition of just letters themselves, whether your super powerful letters that you're purchasing in your deck are harder to build words with, or a constant negative condition that can occur to you are in the form of these penalty cards. Like if you're poisoned by a spider or something, you may have to shuffle a couple of penalty cards in your deck, and these serve as letters that are a bit harder to use. Maybe you don't want to use because you want to spend your time and your resources on building words that produce symbols, but then they clog your deck. So I like that representation of this concept in a fight, but with the word building theme and sense about it. So many things in this game are like this, where it's a perfect pairing of the thematics and the word building background, and I think that Paperback Adventures does it the best. So that is my number 2, that is Paperback Adventures. And my number 1 goes to Capital Lux 2 Generations. As my friend Dan from Chairman of the Board puts it, this is a game of blackjack, but with multiple moving targets, as you're going to be tactically drafting cards and playing them to generate the most victory points while also trying to get one over on your opponents. Every turn will have a choice of playing a card in front of you into your home base, and that's going to be victory points for you at the end if they stay there, or placing it into the capital in the main center area. That's going to increase the bust value for all players in the game, but also trigger an effect that's going to give you some sort of advantage and incentivize you to play towards that center and give up on those victory points. At the end of each round, you'll check who has the majority in each of these areas, but first you'll check to see if anybody has more than what's present. For example, if you had these 6 yellows, you'd lose them because you have more than the 5 yellows that are in the capital. So I love this concept of knowing when to push, when to play, and trying to be as greedy as possible with those victory points, because they do last from round to round, and you got to make sure that you're able to hold on to them. My favorite part of Capital Lux 2 Generations is the increased variability through the addition of special power tiles. In the original Capital Lux, you had a set ability for all of the different colors. Green always lets you draw 1 card, yellow always lets you take 1 coin, but in the new version of Capital Lux 2 Generations, every time you play, you'll be shuffling up these power tiles, and there's several for each color, and have a brand new unique game for each experience. I love this. So it's not only the way that the cards are dealt, but those power fixations at the beginning are going to drastically change your play experience. Now, these can range from having effects that add brand new ways to score, giving you tracks. You can look at the back of the box here. You've got like a rocket ship track that you can go on, ways that you can cause dynamite to blow up everything in the main capital city. So this can make some wild fluctuation of power levels on the different cards that you're playing with, and then when they're working in tandem with each other, it's going to give you brand new unique experiences paired with the players that you're actually at the table with. So that drafting becomes a heck of a lot different, and each experience is one that you're looking forward to seeing how it's going to play out. So you can also just play the original Capital Lux if you want, using all of the A tiles from the game. So you can recreate it if you're trying to teach people and get them more familiar with just how the system works. Because that core framework is so solid, it's allowed them to dive into the creativity and make an experience that's unlike any other. So that is my number 1. That is Capital Lux 2 Generations. And that's it. Those are my top 10 board game sequels. I'm curious to hear what you think of all of the games that I talked about here. What's your favorite board game sequel? And are there any sequels that I need to check out based on the games that I'm enjoying or what you see here? I'd love to hear what you think. And if you haven't already, please go check out Into the AM Studios, SideGame LLC's channel partner, and use coupon code SideGame Strong to get 10% off on your order, as well as give us some support for the channel. Links to all the games that I talked about here in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. SideGame Strong.